What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Django tutorial video. In this video, what we're going to be talking about is styling. So we can break websites down into a lot of aspects, but generally you've got more of the back end, which sometimes is confused with like server back end, but really what we mean by back end is something that isn't presented to the user. And then you've got front end, and this is the actual user interface, so the UI UX, so user interface, user experience. And so generally there's quite the dichotomy here, and people that are good at the back end or the website logic, let's call it, are not generally very good at the user interface. So this can be kind of a challenge if you're a programmer who wants to get into web development, but you are not a designer, you don't know much about HTML, CSS, and all that. So luckily, there is Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is... it's hard to explain it right out of the gate, but basically it provides you with mainly a CSS style sheet, or a CSS, so cascading style sheet, and some JavaScript includes that you can use on your website. And then it also gives you HTML snippets that you can make use of on your website. And basically what it does for you is it allows you to have a nice, responsive, decent looking website very fast. So some examples of my websites that are Bootstrap would be like Centex.com. This is all Bootstrap. I didn't really write any, I wrote some of the HTML, but all the CSS it's just Bootstrap. Okay, so like all that stuff's Bootstrap. Then we've got pythonprogramming.net, the actual web, tutorials website. It's all Bootstrap. Okay, so once you start to learn Bootstrap, you'll begin to see that like a lot of websites are using Bootstrap. You'll start seeing it everywhere. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So what you're going to do with Bootstrap, you can go to getbootstrap.com. One thing to note, Bootstrap does have a content delivery network. It's not here, but I'll show it to you later. Well, we'll click on download Bootstrap. So first go to getbootstrap.com, go to download Bootstrap. Sure enough, here's the information on the CDN. If you're not familiar with a CDN, the idea of a CDN or a content delivery network is to help your websites load quicker. So initially you may not think that 100 milliseconds here, 100 milliseconds there really matters, but it does. It makes a big difference, and a lot of times your users don't even realize that it makes a difference to them. But the faster your website, there's been plenty of studies shown, it makes the user experience way better. If you can make it instant, that's the most ideal thing, right? So this is the CDN. You can use that if you want, and it'll just allow your a CDN basically has like servers, like let's say, in a bunch of locations, and the server that is closest or quickest for your user to access, that's the server that will send the data for let's say in this case is the CSS sheet or the CSS, and there's other stuff too, like this is for the JavaScript and stuff like that. So you can use a CDN. In this tutorial, I'm actually going to show us running the code locally, because it'll allow me to actually show you guys how to handle static files, which, like all your files, you're not going to be able to have a CDN unless you make the CDN. And if you're watching this tutorial, chances are you have no idea how to do that anyways. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about static files and where to store them. So anyways, with CDN in mind, we're going to actually download Bootstrap instead. So you come here and just download Bootstrap. You don't want the source code, you don't want SAS, you want Bootstrap. Once you have Bootstrap downloaded, you should be able to come here, and you've got the zip or whatever. So go ahead and extract it, and then open up this distribution, and you've got CSS, fonts, and JS, so JavaScript. So let me move this aside. We're done in the downloads. I'm gonna move this over, and now I'm in my site. Now you can have a static directory. Just like templates, a static directory per app. So as you can imagine, there may be some images that are specific to that app. Also, your website's main app is also probably going to be where you reference all of your CSS, okay? But you could reference, or at least your main CSS page, let's say. You might have custom CSS per app, but your main app CSS probably in your main website. So every app is probably not going to have separate CSS if it's all with the same website anyways. So we're going to go into personal, and then we're going to make a new directory, and we're going to call it static. Now, with the stuff that we just downloaded, I'm going to highlight it and move it into static. So now within static, we've got CSS, and we've got all these CSS, I keep wanting to say CSS sheets, but right, they're cascading style sheets. So CSS sheets would be cascading style sheets. Anyway, the main one that we're interested in is right here, bootstrap.min.css. That's the one we're actually going to reference. The other ones you can have here, it's not going to make a big difference because we're not referencing them anyways. Also within here, we've got fonts. This is mainly for glyph icons, which we'll talk about here in probably a moment. And then the JavaScript, these are just some JavaScript stuff. So various like popovers and maybe like notification kind of dialogues and modals, stuff like this are going to be using JavaScript. Also like drop-down menus, stuff like that. So if you want to reference that, you have to, reference these. But we'll talk about how to do that here in a moment. When you have a static directory, templates requires it, static requires it. If you're old school Django, you may have actually had to hard code where to find static. If you're using a later version, you probably don't, but just to make sure you are referencing the static directory, you go back to my site, and then the my site, the main kind of my site directory here, so my site / my site. Settings.py, go ahead and edit that with idle, and make sure that you have the settings directory. It's probably at the very bottom right here, static URL equals static. You can also visit this for some information, but you'll get it from me anyway. So just like templates, when you reference a static file, it's going to automatically assume it's in /static. And just like templates, you can have a /static directory for all of your installed apps. Django is just going to mesh them all together. So for the same reason, you may want to lead them off with a personal directory. Now, that's basically all we need. Now we've got that in. Now, how might we actually reference those files? So first of all, let me talk real briefly about Bootstrap. Generally, what I recommend people do the first time you come to see Bootstrap, and then also every time you start a project, I usually go to getbootstrap.com and then hold Control, CSS, Components, JavaScript. Right? Click these 3 tabs. You can also go to Customize if you want, because you can customize Bootstrap in various ways down here. But mainly we're interested in these tabs, and then in these tabs you can see, okay, you've got, these are like basically your I can't think, table of contents, I suppose, and actually quite a good table of contents. I really like this. I'd like to steal the code from that. Basically I usually come to these websites or these pages and just kind of like scroll through looking for stuff that looks interesting, like, oh, I might want to make use of this grid system, so noted. And then you can kind of keep scrolling down, and then you got components. These are those glyph icons, so a lot of times you want to use an icon. These are a bunch of free icons that you can use in your website. But then there's all kinds of stuff. So then you got drop downs and button groups and buttons. You've got nav bars. So here's an example of a nav bar that they build the code. And basically all this stuff like shows you what it would look like, how you would interact with it. And then this is actually the code that you can just copy and paste to your website and then kind of modify it a little bit to be exactly what you want. Anyway, you can keep scrolling down there. And then JavaScript is another good one that you want to scroll down because they do add stuff over time, so you're going to find that you've got new additions as time goes on, which is why it's always a good idea to revisit it. Plus some stuff that you've never used before may be something you might want to use now. So like, for example, here's a modal. So this is why it's a JavaScript. You click this and then you get this like pop-up kind of stuff. So anyway, that's what this is, and to get it you would copy and paste this code, modify to your liking, and so on. There's just a bunch of information there. So I'm gonna leave this aside for now, and we're gonna go into our website and talk about how we can at least include our static files in our CSS page. So the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna go into Personal, Templates, Personal, and the header file. So again, the header file is what's going to encase basically all of our other HTML files for the most part. So in here, this is where we want to load in our CSS. So generally your CSS is going to be loaded in the head of your header, let's say. So to do that, what we're going to do is first what we need to do is we need to load the static files. So the templates didn't really require this, but within here we do need to load in all available possible static files. So first we use a little bit of Ginger logic here and we say load static files. What this does is it tells Django, hey, get ready. I'm about to reference a static file, and I want to be able to reference the static file, so gather up your whole list of static files so you know what I'm talking about when I reference it. So you only need to call this once, and especially if you're calling it in your header file, that means it's being called on all your other files anyways. So you just need to call it one time. You shouldn't have to like call it every time you want to reference a static file. So now what we're going to say is link the relation here it's a style sheet, and basically the reference for this style sheet is, and then here's where, like, normally you would give the path, like let's say like on Flask for example, our style sheets were stored in /static of our website, so you would say /static CSS, and then maybe bootstrap.min.css. Okay, and that might be a way to reference it. And if you were familiar with Flask, actually you could use, you could make this a variable and make it very dynamic. Same thing is true in Django, just slightly different. So instead of hard coding it, we can do this. So the reference will be the static directory, and then from that static directory, it was located in CSS. Actually, let's go back. I don't think I did that. Let's go to templates. Let's see, personal, static. Okay, I did do it. For the same reasons that we did this before, you probably actually don't want it to be in just straight up static. It could go either way here, because generally, at least this information, this is the CSS that we're going to use on the whole website. Very rarely does like a website have custom CSS where that custom CSS completely replaces the other CSS. So sometimes on some pages, you're going to load a local style sheet, so something that kind of appends the existing style sheet. So you still actually will reference the main style sheet. So in this case, in the case of CSS fonts in JavaScript, I don't think you have to have like a personal static, personal CSS fonts JavaScript. You can do whatever you want. If you want to add it, go for it. One thing that I would recommend, like later on when we have like an images directory, I really would suggest you do personal images and then go in, or even images / personal / whatever the thing is. But for the CSS fonts in JavaScript, this is something that's going to apply to all pages. You'll be just fine this way. So anyway, CSS / bootstrap.min.css. Okay, easy enough. Then we finally add our type equals text / CSS. Close off that tag, and we're done. So now we've referenced the style sheet. Before I save this, however, let's go to here, and let's run the site real quick. I don't think I have it up anywhere, so yeah, let's pull it up. It's not running. So now you're going to do a manage.py run server. So Python manage.py run server. Server's running. Let me pull it up. So here's our current website. Everything's very basic. So then what I'll do is we'll come back to this header tab. Let me close these out. Or the header.html file. Save that. We're including the style sheet now. Come back here, refresh, and a couple of things you'll notice. The text is different. It's also not pure black. It's like a very dark gray. Also, the edges are kind of gone there. That's okay. Anyway, bottom line, we see that indeed we have apparently loaded up a style sheet. We can view the source real quick, and we can indeed see that for the style sheet, again, we're not seeing the Ginger logic here. It's the actual HTML. So in theory, the user can take the static link, click it, and sure enough, that's our HTML, or well, our style sheet. So so anything you have in static, just keep in mind that's all publicly available. Okay, so you wouldn't put anything that needs to be secret in your static directories. So let's close this out. I'll zoom out again. And so now we have just some simple stuff. So like let's kind of improve our homepage a bit. So kind of like before, I don't see much point in us like hand coding our HTML here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to copy and paste the HTML from the tutorial. So go to the link in the description to get the code. Otherwise, we'd spend about 30 minutes writing out this HTML, and I don't want to do that to you fine individuals. So I'm going to literally copy and paste it over here again. Go to the description to get the code. And now I will explain it here in a second. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to come back to the website and refresh, make sure everything worked. And let me come back here. Did I? Okay, yeah. So in the code, in the in the sample code, I did have this personal. Again, it really doesn't matter. If you get this, though, it's a good chance or good time for me to reference it. Also, I have a face that I don't have here. So anytime you get this, right? Obviously, our CSS is not here. What the heck happened? We can view the source. We can see, okay, this is where it's trying to reference. Let's check it out. It's not there. It doesn't exist. So we know that's a problem. And then here we can see image source static personal image profile.jpg. That also doesn't exist. So what the heck? So we can come back to our code, and let's say we do want to do the whole personal thing. So what we could say is new folder personal, CSS, fonts, JavaScript, drag that into personal, click that, cool. We obviously don't have that image yet, but then let's come back over to our website. Let's refresh. And sure enough, we've got pretty much everything we need. We're just missing this face.jpg. So let me pause here and let me grab a face real quick. Okay, I've grabbed this profile picture here. I'm going to come over here, and it's actually profile.jpg, so personal image profile.jpg. So we're in personal. We'll make an image directory here, img, move the profile picture into there, and finally our website should work. Let's pull it up. 127. There we go. All right. So obviously we're not winning any awards for this website, but it at least looks okay. So let's explain the code real quick. So coming over here, let me zoom out or scroll out a bit. So again, this is the head. The head basically it just gives the browser some information. Okay, so so here, this is just the title of the tab. You can look at your tab and see, yep, sure enough. This gives the character set UTF-8. Then we load the static files. We load up the CSS page. That's simple. This is a meta tag. Basically, this is for Bootstrap. Okay, so the idea of Bootstrap is to be very mobile friendly. Okay, so with Bootstrap, we've put in some pretty basic HTML here, but you can see, so like this is like a computer screen, but if we squish up the screen, you'll see that everything works. It will just work out in your favor. Okay, in most cases anyway. So you could view this on a phone or a website, or a phone or like a computer, and it looks okay. Okay, so then we bop into the body here, and we start to see, okay, it's a div class container, fluid. That's a Bootstrap specific container. Basically, it's going to be a nice mobile friendly container. And we're giving this a minimum height of 95%. The reason why we're getting away with this is because of this little style addition that we're making. So again, with like, you might have like style sheets just like this, where it kind of appends on top of this style sheet, but you're still always going to reference this one first. Anyway, this just says the page is 100% tall. So the reason why we're doing that is for this footer. This isn't the best way to do this, by the way. It's just the easiest way. So this footer, as you can see, it kind of comes up or down as you move the page around. So eventually it won't roll over these other divs. So basically this is as good as it gets. Once you start conflicting with this other div, it's not going to let you do that. But anyway, that's just our way of making the page always like a full page, right? No matter kind of where you put it. So that's kind of neat. Anyway, that's why we're doing that. Then you get to these rows. Well, the rows are the Bootstrap grids. Let me pull these over. So this is an example of the grids. So that's here. So these stacked grids, this just tells you basically a grid has rows, and then you can say column sizes. The maximum width is 12. So you can have a bunch of ones that add up to 12. You might have an 8 and a 4, a 4, 4, 4, a 6 and a 6, and so on. And that's your way of styling them. As usual, these are also dynamic and mobile friendly, so if the page was squished up a bunch, no problem, it handles for that. So that's just like one example of what we're using. In our case, we're doing a 2 and then a 10. The 2 is containing basically to start our little profile image and our banner and stuff like that. We get down here, we start a new row, and then this one contains these nav pills. So again, we can look at this and the well. So these would be like our navs. So this is in components. You come to navs, there's tabs, there's pills, and all this stuff. Refresh here. There we go. So this is the beginning of that navs. Also, we've got our nav bar that's contained within a well. There's the code. It's just a special div with kind of a darked out background. You can customize that background however you like, though. In our case, we sure enough have customized that background because actually we made the background white, and then the background of our website, our entire website, is actually a darker color. So we did that here. So we've got the nav pills and containers. I think we're all set now, actually. Yeah. So everything else is done. We have footers and a footer tags with HTML5. We got some extra tags like nav and footer and body and header and stuff like this. Header and footer just can correspond to your website's header and footer, maybe the body content header and footer, stuff like that. You don't actually have to contain them in tags that are header and footer and stuff. It's just a good idea. So like something like Google, as they're crawling your website, just makes it really easy for Google to understand what's going on and what the information is and means and stuff. So that's really the basics of the website broken down into what we've got going on. If you have any more questions about how I'm doing something here, feel free to ask. Another thing that I just thought I would show you is like this div with the sidebar affixed. So this line can replace this line. Let me zoom it in now that we're not talking about macro stuff. So what I can do is comment it out. And if you're not familiar to comment stuff, it would be like it's an opening sign. I don't know what to call that. Exclamation mark, dash, dash, blanking on the word. Someone's going to make fun of me. And then you close off the comment like that. So let's open this one up just to show you guys. So we can affix that sidebar. So although we don't have enough content, but I'll add some content. Refresh, and it looks identical. And what we could do, just to show, is let's go into personal templates, personal home. Whoops, shouldn't have done that. I want to edit it with Notepad. And then like, I'm just gonna copy this, paste, 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 and then copy, paste, 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 paste. Okay, so it's a nice long home page. And we can refresh. And now, as we scroll, our little nav bar stays in place. So that's pretty cool. But what ends up happening is the following. So when we're up here, everything's kind of rolling over it, right? Because this is a nav bar that moves like with the stuff. So obviously that's messy. You want something that's going to be totally responsive. So that would be an example of a mistake. So as you're developing, it's always a good idea to check various sizes and try to mimic screens. If you are in Chrome, one thing that's pretty cool, you can press F12 and go into, I believe it'll be sources. No, let's see, element, maybe this one. There we go. So this little screen up here, you can toggle device mode. We'll just make it full screen here. And you can mimic what your website will look like on various devices. So we can see on whatever this device happens to be. Let's try an Apple iPad. Okay, that looks pretty cool. Let's try a BlackBerry. Okay, that looks pretty cool. I'm trying to find, show me like a phone, man. iPhone 5. That still looks pretty good. It's not bad, I suppose, but we should be getting that overlay. I'm not sure why we're not getting it, because we still do have that problem with the div here. But let me comment that one out, because I'm not going to actually use it. And then open this one back up. But you can come here and look at what it looks like on various devices. The other thing that you can do is, and then also like obviously this is like your finger, so like you can mimic clicking things with your finger and doing this and that and the other thing. Anyway, so there you go. Yeah, so for some reason now it's actually loading as you might expect. That's weird. Before it was like really zoomed out. That's just not the way it would be. But you can also like use your phone, right, and visit it with your phone and make sure everything works. Also, you can test the speed on your phone and stuff like that. So obviously, as long as you're developing locally, though, like if you try to visit this locally, that's not going to work. But once you actually have like something that you can either host locally on like an actual like IP, like your local IP, or even your website, every time you push an update or something like that, you should periodically check it on your phone to make sure things are working as you might expect. I'm going to close out of this now, and I guess I'll just move this over. So anyways, that's all for this tutorial. If you have questions, comments, concerns, whatever, feel free to leave them below. In the next tutorial, we're going to start actually building out our website. Let me zoom out here. And so as you can see, we've got a home page, blog, and a contact page. So all that stuff is something that we actually want to build here. So that's what we're going to be doing as we progress through these tutorials. So anyways, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for all the support and subscriptions. And until next time.